Hey, can you hear me okay?
I can. It's like
How
you
are you?
cut yourself. Good.
Got myself. Shaving isn't the norm here in Alaska. What is, I just want to make sure I have the right versions by date of the budget. Um, I guess we're going to work on the 22 budget.
hmm And it's the one that, let's see, I'm gonna pull it up. Which paper's email?
I suppose I could just print this again. Feb 25.
Yes.
Feb 25.
Yeah.
Okay. Move on to
Okay, put my last name.
then the 23 budget worksheet, there hasn't been a new one since the 26th of February.
Not to my knowledge.
Great. Awesome. Well, conveniently, I have both of those.
Good.
I'm going to do a little reading and as soon as the other people join, I'll rejoin you.
Sounds perfect.
Jen, you still there?
Yep.
And then didn't we have the soon to be famous one pager?
Yeah. Do you not have that? I can forward you the email.
And that was really a two pager.
I shortened it down to one page. It should have been. It was in one version. It was 2 pages, and then I helped Piper get it to 1. So it truly was a 1.
I must have printed it wrong. Will you send it to me again and I'll just make sure I have the right one? This is sort of for both the end of 22 and the 23. Right?
Let me see. I gotta open it up. I'm forwarding it to you now, and then I already had it open actually. Yeah, she's got both numbers on it across the top.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't see a date on it, but the number I have in the lower corner is
Oh, and it is. Oh, she didn't send it out as one page. Oh, and
well,
I
maybe,
also, yeah. So I think she did some updates to it from the other version.
cool. Just to make sure I have the lower right hand corner number is 2,183,834.
Yes, on page 1.
Great. Okay, all set. Thanks.
Yeah, no, we can easily put this on one page.
Great. I like the full length version because I'm an
Well,
accounting.
then the numbers are not tiny, but
right.
right.
I know it really means a lot to some of the people to see it get down to one page, or honestly, I don't think anybody would argue about the difference between this and one page. So
Yeah.
this was clearly doing what was asked, and yeah, it won't surprise me if this is what everybody wants to march through. You know what I mean? Instead of the actual budget worksheet.
Yeah, especially at this level of picking through it for sure.
copy you. See you in a few minutes.
Okay, sounds good. I'm listening if you need anything else.
Okay.
Sorry. Oh, I guess I'm not late, but Jen, can you still hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
I just got a call from someone wanting a notary, so I gave him your number. He'll probably text you.
Okay, I have my stuff with me. I kept it with me just in case that stuff happens.
Oh, I thought it was because I brought it to you.
Well, yeah, but I kept it with me. I've been back
Oh,
in the office and
whether
usually,
you're in the office or not. Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see.
You
Hmm.
told them that we were in a meeting. Just,
Yes, I said you'd be in a meeting for an hour and a half, probably.
and we are
Elise,
live on YouTube, but I'm not recording yet, just FYI.
okay. Elise, I'll ask you, because I don't see Craig yet. Does anyone know if Craig is joining us?
I'm not sure.
Okay. No, I wasn't asking you that, but I was going to ask you how you wanted to handle this meeting, because I know you've now caught up and watched the other one. Do you want us to go? I mean, I still have questions that I want the committee to look at, and I guess I could just start with those, because I'm going to assume that the people that weren't there have watched it.
Yeah,
Elise
that's what I
has
would do.
Elise has told me some of her thoughts on that, which basically came down to that she realizes what we talked about, the need for the truth and taxation hearing, and to increase property taxes, hopefully up to where we were about 2 years ago. So there's Craig. Okay. And does anyone have comments on that, the property tax increase?
Piper, not to interrupt you, but do we want to officially call the meeting to order?
Sure. Roger?
I think we kind of probably need to do that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm hereby calling this meeting on the tentative town budget to order at 2:01 p.m. on Friday, the 18th of March. We do not have a anchor location per my letter of last month concerning the safety of all involved.
I think it's actually this month.
Is it? Do we have a new one for this month? All right.
You had to sign a new one for this month.
Okay,
so
good.
15th, Jen, does that sound right? Or the 14th? Yeah, anyway, it's in the, it's posted on the website, the determination letter.
All right.
Okay, I'll start over. That, Craig, hi. I'm not sure if you got a chance to watch the YouTube recording of the last meeting. Were you able to? Can't hear you, but it doesn't look like you're muted. No. Nope, can't hear you.
I just asked you to unmute. Maybe that prompt helps, Craig.
I see his mouth moving.
How about this? That do it?
Yeah,
That works.
loud and clear.
Great.
That was a configuration issue on my side. I apologize. Okay. Yes, I did watch the entire thing. As I commented, it was a thrilling video, I might add.
You get the
I
first
felt the
one for
same
free,
way.
but from here on out, we start charging.
Rave reviews.
Elise or Craig, do you have any general comments you want to make about that meeting?
I have some general comments, and I also have a number of questions, but maybe I can let Elise start first.
I mean, I don't have too many. Like I told Piper, and I've said this in previous town council meetings. I think we need to be less reliant on sales tax as much as possible. So I do agree that we need to increase property tax. I don't know if that's going the full stretch right away, or, incrementing it up, but I do think we need to do that. And other than that, I didn't have any other comments on the meeting. More just waiting to hear from staff on what staff thinks we need and what we should prioritize in the budget. We don't have a lot to work with, so we just kind of only have so much.
I will, sorry, I don't mean to run the meeting, Roger. You can
No,
definitely
go ahead.
do
You're
that,
doing
but,
fine. Yeah.
I will start off saying that I think we're here more to talk about the 2023
Next year's
budget, because the 2022 budget, we're still early in the year. I will say that I think if we go on track, that we are going to meet or exceed our budgeted sales tax revenue. And I don't think there's any problem with us meeting our expenditures, balancing our budget, I should say, that our revenues and our expenditures will balance, or our expenditures will be less than our revenue. So I don't know that there's much to talk about with that, except to say that there'll be some adjustments when it gets closer to the year end. And then, so I will go back to the 2023 budget and talk about in the latest materials that I sent out. Oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
Could I just make a quick comment on Elise's comment, which I think is right, and I'm all for being less dependent on sales tax. We need to have some other leg to stand on in this world of uncertainty and pandemic. I think one of the questions that at some point we ought to try to think about, and I think we have a couple months, is do we want to target a specific revenue, or do we want to come up with a property tax rate and look to hold that rate fixed over time, so that as the assessed values around town go up, we'll see more revenue from that. Sort of inflation will be on our side, and will be, in my mind, that's more closely matching our revenue stream to our expenses, and the expenses are going to grow at some inflationary kind of thing. And if we got our arms around a property tax rate I'd be open to, even some kind of a pledge that we're gonna, try to keep the rate the same, at least for the next 3 years or something like that. And that way we're really communicating clearly with our constituents and we're laying out a plan and there's not a bunch of uncertainty that this is the first of many tax rate increases. I'm actually would be about holding the tax rate constant. It's just something to think about.
Well, if I can comment on that, John, what the uncertainty will not be in the tax rate, it will be in the appraisal rates or the and
Valuation.
those we have, no ability to, as far as I can tell, to influence. And so what's ahead is not what, indeed the tax rate will be constant, but what the assessor says your place is worth is, basically uncontrollable.
And beyond our control, at least it appears to be at this point. I think right now there are two uncertainties because the tax rate changes each year under the Truth in Taxation program. And by us nailing down a tax rate that we think we can live with, we'll be removing one of the two uncertainties from the equation. I'm not sure it's the more powerful of the two uncertainties, but it's one of the two. So I think that the people would be a little better off like that.
Yeah,
So-
and they would understand, I think. Sorry, who was going? Who did I cut off?
Craig, but I'm used to it.
Well, they were even.
Can I
must be
take,
married.
can I take a step back before we dive into the property tax? And I also want to, before we do that, actually maybe reframe the property tax stuff a little bit. And the step back is, this is my first budget committee meeting. That's because I missed the first one that I was supposed to be at. But I think the budget committee is maybe a new process for the town of Alta. And whether it is or a new one or not, I actually think if you're going to have a committee, the committee ought to have a purpose and a charter. And so I think that, and we don't need to decide this minute, but I think I had a couple of ideas around, essentially around the charter. And it seems to me that there are maybe 2 or 3 things that we should be doing. The first one is that we should scrub and recommend a budget to the town of Alta council members. So sort of, we do an in-depth dive, then it gets recommended to the council and they actually create the final budget. Second one, I would call a compliance function. There are certain compliance things, that have to do with audit committees and stuff like that. We as a committee ought to, I think, make sure that all the records and processes that we have comply with the statutory duties. I think that's an important part of any separate, budgeting committee. And then the last one is the one that I'm most interested in, but others may not be, and that is to help set up reports that make it easy for the town of council members to actually understand and make the right budget decisions, and the same with our citizens. And let me go into just a bit of what I mean by that, because I think Piper, in response to, my comment to Roger, when you first sent me all the material, I go, okay, 6,852 pages. Believe it or not, it takes me a long time to wade through this. You got cross currents going in between funds and things like that. And it's just so incredibly technical to understand it that it's easy to miss the high level decisions. So one of the longer term things, because this is not something we're going to do between now and the end of June, but I would hope that what we would do over the next year is create what I call an MIS view, which is a management information systems view, which reconciles to the regulatory view, but is simpler for people to understand and actually highlights the actual decisions that we're making. So, Roger, what I will do with your permission is I'll just write these 3 things up as suggested charter for the committee. can circulate it by email, and then whether that's a decision that you're empowered to make by yourself, or whether you want to do that at the town council or whatever, I don't care, but I at least wanted to start there. Any comments or questions before I go to the next item that we were diving in on, which I think is the property one?
Go for it.
Okay, so John and Piper had a good discussion last time about what John called diversification. And I think a little bit more precisely put, John, is we would say too much of our planned expenditures are based upon an input which is highly variable. And the reason I'm phrasing it that way is we know what property taxes are. They're 100% predictable after we get the rates and the assessments. It's not true with sales tax. That is the precise problem. There are other fees that we can have that also are predictable, all right? Licensing and other things. And so what I'm saying is this is not just sales tax versus versus property tax. It's actually ex ante predictable versus only ex post understandable. And our ratio, as John has called out, is similar to what other resort towns may have, but is completely different from what any sane city budget planner would want to have, because it's too risky. It's like a high beta variance thing. It's very risky. So I think the only reason I'm calling this out, John, is I don't want to get to making the final decision on property tax in a vacuum without looking at the other items. And the other thing that I wanted to call out, and it's also prompted by your other email, John, is that I sort of hate to be making any promises on property tax or anything else until we take a look at the big picture long-term budget. And you saw my email, which really was in response to the work that you've done. I think the work you've done on the water, that you're doing in the water fund, is exactly right. I think we need to do that on the sewer as well. And we probably need to look at all the rest of the, the municipal buildings and other stuff, because making promises in the context of a one-year budget when we haven't done our 10-year plan, that also seems somewhat risky to me. So I want to be clear. All of your suggestions make sense with what I know now, but I think we might want to get some more input on those other items before we're making longer term decisions, and especially any promises to our citizens.
Yeah, I guess Elise and I think would agree with you on the basic issue of diversifying our revenue stream makes sense. With respect to the upcoming budget, the 23 budget, I think there's a certain pragmatic balance that needs to be struck. I have been enjoying the process of doing the water fund, and I agree that it was my intention at the outset to then use that template once we all feel good about it, and to do a mirror one for the sewer fund, do a mirror one for the CapEx fund, and do a mirror one for the general fund to the extent we can. The general fund's much harder to predict. And I think that's, so I agree. I love plans. I love 10-year plans. I think they should all consolidate. That's all great. I got to tell you, I think of that as post this budget cycle work.
Yeah, me too.
Because I think just getting to the budget cycle with the transition in the clerk's office, getting through the 23 budget cycle, well, any year, even if we weren't transitioning in the clerk's office, the upcoming budget between now and the timetable to present to the council in May, I think we're in pretty good shape. I think it's going to be fine. And with respect to, I think we're in agreement on the property tax idea. I guess I threw that out as if people are worried about the increase, I think one way to handle it would be to focus on trying to be consistent with the rate going forward. But if we're not in a position to do that and have it be credible and mean it, then I agree with you. We shouldn't do it.
Yeah, it was only that last. we should do something in the property tax this year. Why? Because we gotta start moving in the right direction, and we know we're way out of whack.
Well, we've had extraordinary payroll cost changes, and I expect that that's going to continue for at least through the 23 actual year and maybe beyond. I mean, who knows? But I walked out of Target yesterday with a bunch of shit I didn't need, and there was a sign that said $17.50 starting wage. 17.50. Doesn't that seem high to you? Maybe it's just because we're old, but it just seems so high. Roger, what do you think? I mean, it's crazy. So I think that the wage pressure is going to continue. We're going to want to continue to retain our people. And so if not making the, we may not be prepared to actually make a commitment to the tax rate longer term, and maybe we'll allude to it, but give ourselves the flexibility to adjust. If that's what you're saying.
Another little anecdote on wages. The mayor of Brighton also owns the Silver Fork Lodge. He's trying to hire a cook, assistant cook. He's got a sign outside that says $22 an hour, and he can't get any applicants.
Does he have any housing?
I don't know, but
I mean, but I hear you though.
yeah.
No, inflation's going to be hard here for the next 3 to 5 years, I think. So I think we just have to deal with that. But as long as you're comfortable, John, again, do something on the property tax this year. I don't really have a strong opinion on what. To me, the easiest thing would be go back to what it was before last year and just, okay, we're doing a temporary thing. And then if we get pushback on it, we'll say, yes, we're taking a longer term look at this, but we need, the rest we
Another
need until
calendar
the then
Great, thanks, Craig, because that's one thing. I mean, we did go way backwards with our percentage of the budget coming from property tax last year because of the UFSA. So we took a big drop in property taxes as well as an increase in wages. And in the municipal game, in public administration, no municipality ever does anything with sales tax, except for frosting on the cake, except for resort communities. I mean, look at us. We talk about diversification, and I don't want to get, I mean, it's great to talk about, but we have property tax and sales tax. We can't make $1 billion on business licenses. We can't make $1 billion on liquor licenses. I mean, those are our two main things. And 80% of our property area is Forest Service. And let's see, 1, 2, 3 people on this Zoom are property taxpayers. So 20% of our population is property taxable. We can't really nail them that much. So we're stuck with a very unbalanced and unusual property tax, sales tax split. Now, the other thing we could do is just say, okay, everything that we're going to do that we can rely on, we're going to live within our property tax budget. So that would be one cop, maybe a clerk. I don't know what else, but that's it. So we risk and gamble every single year because we're a resort community. So we just have to kind of keep that in mind.
Yeah, I agree. There's a limit for how diverse we're going to get. I think everybody's in agreement. We should constantly be looking for new revenue sources. But I agree with you, John. Sales tax is always going to be the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and we have almost nothing to say about that. Property tax, hopefully we'll get it back to a 30 or 40% of the cover 30 or 40% of the expenditures. But I think that's probably represents the high side of what's possible. So I agree with you.
Well, Margaret did raise the issue of some other kinds of effectively impact taxes that we might be able to take. Again, we can't do that this year, but we certainly can do it before next year. And there may be some good arguments to actually be able to raise some significant revenues that way. But if you're comfortable on that, on the property tax, the other discussion that I believe you on, John, because I know you've done your homework, but none of that homework was visible. And that was, you were calling out, I think, a $500,000 increase on the wage side. That is pretty big. I'm sure my expectation is that that's a consequence of not just the short-term inflation stuff that we're facing immediately, but is also a consequence of this being an overdue inspection. But I don't really know the details behind it. Have you got some? And as I, consistent with my earlier comments, I think it's important that if we're doing that big an increase, that we just have some detail behind it to support it to not just the town council, but also the citizens behind it.
Yeah, I would say that I was definitely ballparking it at that meeting, and I was including the end of the year's property tax, or excuse me, the end of the year Marshall's AMO raise, was really everybody. It was really most of the town, not everybody though. And then what's budgeted for this year, and I haven't seen a really great exhibit depicting that, and I should defer to Piper as to what she thinks the number really is. Can I guess somewhere between 300 and 500,000, you think, Piper?
Your question is between the current salaries and with a 10% across the board increase?
Right, plus the change in the marshal's office or the AMO, what we refer to as the AMO change, but I guess it was everybody except the staff people.
In the mid-year amendment, everybody got an increase.
Oh, great.
There was sorry, I just had it up. There was an increase that added up to about $107,000 in full-time wages. The majority of that, 107,000 total, 100,000 of that was in the marshal's department for 9 employees. I'm not counting the part-timers because you have to estimate how many hours they're working, and so it's not as easy to show that, but it was a big increase. It was an across the board hourly increase in dollars, not in percentage. And so the increase varied in percentage from 15% to 32%. And if you talk about the 10% for that we proposed in that previous worksheet, that's another 75,000 in addition to that. So if you're adding those two up, we're talking about under 200,000.
But close to 200,000. I stand corrected though. I overestimated that change in costs. I believe there are other changes in costs that I included in that. And but I'd also say that historically, this has not been an area where the council itself has gotten deeply involved. And I think that there's a sensitivity because of the GRAMA type requests and public information that I personally think a wiser course would be to defer to John on these increases, or at least let John break trail and we can all stand back and try to salute. I very much embrace retaining the staff, and we're really trusting that the 10% number came from John and the staff, and that they think that's going to meet the goal of retaining our people. But I do think we ought to have some kind of a line in the sand that maybe we're going to look and want to understand what's happening over there, but that maybe we shouldn't be crossing. Just throwing it out there.
Well, that's a good toss. And I think the 10% now would help equalize the mid-year raise for the police and dispatchers last year. And as far as retention, how do I say this? I'm not sure that, if we don't raise our rates, people aren't going to run down and go work at Vail for $20 an hour. So there's something about Alta that keeps people where they are. But that said, it would be nicer to get back in line or to get more in line with comparable salaries for similar positions in other municipalities. I mean, everybody's not going to quit tomorrow, but it's good that we're going that direction because, the other thing in the resort community, on top of relying on sales tax, is that places like the town of Alta gets compared with dishwashers and chair loaders. And it's like, well, you can't pay the town clerk $8 an hour because that's not what we pay our dishwashers. So the resort communities are a difficult place to deal with wages and salaries for real jobs. And that was a mistake. Not real, they're all real jobs, but for more serious jobs.
Career-oriented jobs. Nobody really bucks chairs forever, although it seems like.
Thank you.
Sometimes.
Looking
I
more
might start on
closely
Monday.
at next year's increases, I'm not sure that I'm in favor of an across-the-board percentage increase, but I do think that John and the mayor are the ones that should look more closely at that.
So what are you in favor of, Piper?
Well, I can interrupt Piper right now. She's used to that because, if you're doing a forward raise, the people at the top get a higher dollar raise than the people at the bottom.
Right.
And some of the people in the bottom and up have already gotten a big raise. So you look at existing salaries and you kind of even it out so that it's fair. It's kind of a fair and comparable amount for everybody. So it might be 10% for somebody who hadn't gotten a raise last year and 5% for like some of the people that got the mid-year raises last year. So it's kind of a mix. And if
Is
you
that
just
what you're thinking of?
Okay, but
Is that what
somebody
you're
needs,
thinking of, Piper?
I actually sent you an email that maybe you could look at, Roger, that we can talk about offline, that I don't think it serves a purpose to go into the details here.
Okay. Oh my
Craig.
gosh.
you were saying,
I was saying, somebody needs to do the line by line. And then it needs to be somewhere, I would appreciate if it were summarized back to us as a, what's the total percentage on the base? So in other words, if some people are getting 2% raises and some people are getting 15, what's the weighted average, total percentage? Because I think that's sort of the level at which the town of Alta should hopefully, at the high level, sign off on. Although, and here's my concern, and I'll be very, very clear, is if you said we were doing a 10% across the board raise, inflation's high, but it's not 10% yet. And that would be a pretty big raise. And the only way that would intellectually make sense to me is if we say, well, the reason we're doing a 10% raise is because honestly, we haven't done a raise across many of these employees for the last 3 years. So we've got this much, which is catch up, and this much which is inflationary. That's, I'm not like John. I can't go down into all these details and understand it. But I'm pretty good with high level numbers, but they need to make sense. And the 10% across the board, I go, whoa, that sounds sort of big. I don't understand.
right. Piper's halfway there. We're halfway there.
Whatever, just do the line by lines with Piper and Roger, and then give us a summary that we can digest and that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's just on employee wages.
Right.
And I think it seems to me that that's something a place we ought to start. And And then let's see what how our revenues look. Once we've got that, we've got a sensible plan for that. And then we can start working on what our property tax rate should be. Now, is that an order that sounds sensible to the rest of you?
Yeah, so what do we have in certain, what's our projection? Maybe we don't have one yet because we got to start with the personnel plan first.
For 23, is that what you're asking? For
Yeah, so let me
2023?
make it more
Minus
precise.
two, I think it's minus 250,000 is about, is that right?
That was the number that you quoted last time. I think, let me make it more precise. Let's get the personnel plan. Let's take the property tax back up to what it was. Now, what do we look like?
Yeah.
Well, the spreadsheet that I sent you most recently does put the 400,000 at property tax, and it includes 10% across the board increases. So I believe on page 8, it shows the total revenue is 2248. Well, this is balanced. I balanced it, but this assumes that you're going to spend 85,000 out of your savings to balance this budget. But I also, because I didn't get direction from the council on how you want to increase the sales tax number. So this budgeted amount is the same as this current year, which is on track to exceed this number. So you could go up higher. If we
Right.
received the.
I just want to point, I
Oh,
just
go
want
ahead.
to, I just want to point out quickly that the 250 was based on an earlier draft of this. So she's moved the sales tax back to 4. I just want to emphasize that.
Yeah,
So she moved the sales tax back to 400, which was the sort of the consensus of the last meeting. And she's rebudgeted the wages for a 10% increase, and it's minus 80,000. Before it was like minus 250.
right.
So just to make sure we're all on the same page.
When
I
you say
personally think
move-
we should, I personally think we should walk through the 23 budget at some point in today's discussion, but I didn't mean to cut you off, Piper. Sorry.
When you say she moved the sales tax back to 400,
No,
Property
no, the
tax.
property
it was the
tax.
property tax.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. If I misspoke, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Right, the property tax, she moved back to 400 and budgeted for the 10% across the board, and we're still showing a modest deficit. But I think Piper was about to suggest that we could offset that deficit by modestly increasing our sales tax assumption.
Yes,
Not our sales tax rate, just our assumption that we would have another good year, right?
Right, and gross 100,000 more. Piper, what do you want to change it to?
I'm not sure I would go that high, but if I'm looking at last year's March, April, May, June, July numbers, or I should say the fourth number, April, May, June, July, disbursements that we got, and we added those same amounts to what we have already earned, we're going to exceed this by 200,000, the sales tax number,
Wow.
Yeah.
which is great. So now what do we put on for next year? What do we think that number is going to be for next year?
I could go with half again as much as a starting point.
Yeah.
100,000 more increase, not 200,000 more next year. So we'd
So
be
1.3?
slowing the rate of increase. in The
Yeah,
budget.
you mean, John, you're talking about 100K more in sales tax next year? Is that what you're suggesting?
Right.
That's what I understood him to say.
She's saying we're going to be 200,000 ahead this year I think we should budget an increase, but I think we should slow the rate of increase. So instead of 200, I could vote for 100, which would be half again as much as the sales tax increase we enjoyed this year.
And how do you come up with that much increase in sales tax?
Well, how did we come up with it this year? Ski area charging more for lift tickets, the ski area having a good year, higher occupancy at the lodges. I don't want to, we don't get to change the rate as John mentioned a while ago, there's not a lot of low hanging fruit in that area. So I think the assumption needs to be based on what do you think is going to happen to total revenue? And even just the 5-7% inflation we're experiencing, I think would result in at least $100,000 more sales tax next year than we're going to enjoy this year, including the $200,000 increase.
Here's a place where Elise may have some data for us. Do you anticipate lift rates going up 10% next year?
I don't know. It's not, the skier usually doesn't start talking about that stuff until more summertime. So I'm not sure what the thought is. I mean, I would assume they're going to go up. I don't know what the increase would be though. Each year is a little different.
Mm-hmm.
And then same with season pass sales. The skier usually goes on sale for season passes in May. And then we have 3 or 4 different price increase tiers. And so that pricing hasn't been discussed either. So there's still a lot of change coming up.
I think one thing we can be assured is it's not going to go down.
It is not going to go
also
down.
don't think that's usually part of the conversation. I mean, we don't ask the businesses if their rates are going to go up, and I don't think that's really a proper question to ask Elise, or the other businesses in town. I mean, but I think it is, like Roger said, the rates aren't going to go down, and the occupancy rate could be going up. Are we going to have a good snow year? I mean, it's
a lot of variability.
the sales tax numbers don't usually go down year over year. I will say that.
I think this is a judgment call, and at least I personally think, Piper seems comfortable with it. John Goldner, I've seen nodding his head here the last few minutes. John, do you think $100,000 budgeting $100,000 increase in sales tax, which could amount to be 7 or 8%? Are you comfortable with that, John Goldner?
It might be a little scary. It's more conservative than what we were talking about with the 200.
Right.
But as Mike Mon said the other day, this year or recently might be their best year ever.
Ever.
So
Yeah.
we've always been really conservative and then mostly pleasantly surprised at the end of the year. So
A lot of merit in that.
if Piper is happy with 100, I'd be safer. It would
Well,
feel safer.
100,000 represents almost 8%.
That
And
might be a little
that's-
scary to me, but I'm not really the numbers guy, so
Well,
I'd go less.
what would be, well, hang on. Do we have any idea of how much of the increase in the revenue is due to their parking charges as opposed to increased day usage?
No, and
There's
that's
no sales
also,
tax.
that's also not really a proper question to ask them. I mean, they are a private company, their revenue information is private, and they have made clear that they don't really want to share that.
Piper, did you catch what Mike Maury was saying about?
Yeah,
there's no sales tax?
yeah, there's no sales tax collected on the parking fees. Craig, I'm not sure if you're aware of that. Let me just throw this in. None of us have a crystal ball about what next season looks like. But there are some trends that we can make some, pretty informed guesses with. and those trends are, even with, climate change and all of that, Utah seems to be, the benefiting from, the business we're getting from other states. That's been consistent for the last 2 or 3 years, and I don't see why that would change. That we tend to have a better product, and there's a strong desire for skiing and lodging, and I think that's going to continue.
I do too. The more
And quite honestly, what we're getting, what the Sierras and Colorado can't offer early season, and even right now.
Chris, it looks like you've raised your hand.
You're muted,
you're muted.
Chris.
Yeah, I shouldn't be muted anymore. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, there's been some back and forth on how to project sales tax for next year. And maybe it's just that I need a reminder, and that you all have gone through this a bit already in putting together the budget document that we have, the 23 tentative budget that we have. But isn't there a formula that we have followed in years past for projecting sales tax that amounts to an average of the 3 prior fiscal years? Is that not what?
There's not a set formula, but starting in 1920, when the pandemic hit, we did use, there was difference of opinion on what percentage to use of the average of the previous 3 years. So it went down to like 60% and up to 85%.
Piper, I have a question. Is it still true that total sales tax received from lodging slightly exceeds ski area sales?
Yes. There's a room tax, transient room
Yeah.
tax.
I mean, it used to be about a 60-40 split, as I recall, that, what we got from ski area sales, was accounted for about 60% of our sales tax received, and lodging, 40. And, over the last decade, that sort of flip-flopped. So you can't ignore the lodging numbers. And for what it's worth, I've informally talked to the lodges, and their numbers are all substantially up as well.
And overall inflation is running 7%. So the $100,000 really, in a way, only represents what's going to be broad inflationary growth likely going forward. I agree with you about the lodges. They're all super happy and giddy. That there's no way they're not going to bump their prices at least as well. But the other thing we could do is go through the 23 budget and see if we think that there's anything we want to cut, and that would eat into the $80,000. I personally don't think there's a lot of love there, but I'm happy to go through the exercise if Piper and John think that would be useful, and Roger thinks that would be useful.
Well, and that's a really good point, John, and Piper and Jen help me. But, we run a really lean operation, and maybe 75 to 80% of the budget is stuff that we just don't even question that we're not going to do next year. So there's not a lot of stuff that we can really cut out, because there really is no fluff. There's no extra in our budgets.
I personally agree with you, John, but you get to things like I know Roger wants to stay in the Central Wasatch Commission. It's $15,000. It would be 20% of the shortfall. I don't think we should cut that. I think we should stay in the Central Wasatch Committee. But we could go through this. I'm sure at some point we'll talk about ACBB. I've really come full circle on ACBB. I think they have a unique role in the community and have morphed their mission statement. And I don't want to see the ACBB money go away. But those are the types of things we talk about if we wanted to go through the expenses.
So it seems to me that 100,000 increase is easily to justify, and it might be wrong, because we have a horrible ski year. But in terms of being a best estimate, it seems, I think, quite prudent. And if we do that, then we more or less have a balanced budget. So we don't have to go through the detail for the purpose of cutting budgets. I did listen to, you guys went through all that detail in the 2-hour session last time. I did listen to it. I actually had nothing from this sounds too expensive. I happen to be on the other side of the Central Wasatch just because I think they're working against my interests. But it's $15,000. It's not really monetary. It's really a philosophical thing of where should the town of Alta be vis-a-vis the Central Wasatch. I find most of the things that they do don't align with at least my personal view. Not that that matters, but I do think the town of Alta should take a position on it. But I don't think it's based upon money. And my main point is, I think your $100,000 recommendation is correct. I think we should go with it. That means the budget is more or less balanced. I don't think we need to make any changes other than doing the detail in the personnel plan and detailing that out in a way that is understandable to the town council members and our citizens. And then I think if there are any other discussions along the lines of I don't want to give money to the Wasatch Commission because I don't like them. The town council can have those things, but it's not really forced by cost-cutting issues.
Half of 1%. It would be half of 1%.
Yeah, it's
in the noise.
So just for reference, if you're looking for this number that we keep talking about, it's on page 8 of the more detailed worksheet that's on the screen, and the old one said 244,510. It's the net total general fund number. There is no specific account code for that, but it's page 8. That's the number.
But if you put $100,000 higher, and that's going to go to 15 the other way.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct. I would be happy to move that, with the changes that we've discussed, keeping the across the board raise of 10% for now, raising the sales tax estimate by $100,000, moving the property tax back to 400. We know that means truth in taxation. We are okay with that. I would move that we, for the purposes of this meeting, accept that result and look forward to presenting it to the town council absent the need to meet again or have other changes. Is that too long a motion? That's a super. How can I say that more? How can I say that better, Roger?
You couldn't say that better. That's perfect.
No, that sounds really reasonable, an approach, because that gets rid of the 85,000 that you're using for unreserved funds, 86,000. And it also allows for some kind of transfer to the capital projects fund of at least 15,000. Or you can lower that 100,000 projection and bring it down to the 86,000. So you're not using any of your unreserved funds. And then anything else, any sales tax above that 86,000 will go into the transfer, if you want it to, into the transfer to capital projects funds.
Personally, I'd go with 100,000 recommendation just because it's splitting the baby. It's a guesstimate anyway. I do have one question for you, John, because I think you talked across purposes here. What you said earlier was you'd really like the salary recommendations to come out of John and I assume Piper as well. The 10% sounds a little bit more like a swag than a line by line thing. Do you want to go with the 10% swag, or do you want John and Piper and Roger, frankly, to do a line by line review and come up with a precise number?
I think that we're undoubtedly going to have one more meeting before this goes to the council in May to look this over again. Piper, would you agree with that? that
Sure.
just the experience has been that we'll probably need to meet about this again in early May or late April. And I'd be fine asking Roger and John and Piper to do the line by line review you're asking for. I think there is a sensitivity that we probably shouldn't be presenting that at an open meeting.
Right.
And that that part should be handled off book, as they say, or not under the camera's eyes. I think we don't want to have a bunch of discussion about individual employees and their wage level on
No.
Zoom. So I'm happy to give my vote to Roger or John or you, Craig, and I'll just skip that meeting if you want. But if all of us being here necessitates having it on Zoom, then I'll just take that meeting off if you want, because we should try to be sensitive on this issue.
Thank you for that comment. I agree with that. And I think that Roger and John are the best ones to review that. I can help by giving them some spreadsheets, some information.
Yeah, I also agree. That's you don't want the city council's second guessing what Susie's getting as opposed to what Johnny's getting. That's just that's not appropriate.
And it's actually easier for you to participate than it is for us to participate in it because of the Open Meeting Act. So, if you end up being part of Roger's advice on that, more power to you.
So I think we're leaving that ball in your court, Roger, to get the precise number. And I think what John is saying is we need it before our final meeting, before the June meeting, but we don't necessarily need it for the next meeting. That for the next meeting, the swag of 10% is good enough. It's in the numbers and the numbers look fine. So more or less, this is our recommended budget. Did I get you right, John?
Yeah, or at least, I'm sure Piper will put out a revision to the budget, and it'll be the most recent one as of the date she publishes it. And absent other changes, yes, this could be our recommended budget. Elise, are you comfortable with all that?
Yeah, it sounds good. It sounds like a good solid plan. I think, I've been on the budget committee now for, I can't remember how many years. I don't know, not that long, maybe 6 years or 5 years, but I think this is a solid plan. I do think that we have to look at this wage thing. Maybe Roger and John will decide that individual wage increases will be merited, or maybe it'll be more of a blanket, but we'll let them figure that out. But I think we'll proceed with a truth and taxation hearing. I think we've got a good plan for sales tax. The funny thing is everything we've talked about in this meeting, we talk about every year in the budget committee. Like all the things that you can play with, whether it's the Wasatch, Central Wasatch Commission, the ACVB, like we talk about these things every year. We talk about wages, we talk about sales tax. So we're kind of proceeding as normal. So sounds good.
That's good to know. That's good to know.
Thank you for that comment, Elise.
Yes.
I have a big picture thing you want to talk about. Can I throw out a big picture thing?
Sure.
Maybe this will segue us into the next segment if we're ready. I think one of the things that I'd like to see us do, I guess I'm dovetailing to Craig's big picture remarks. One of the things that having a longer term plan for the different enterprise funds, the CapEx fund, and ultimately the general fund, is that we can start to project future cash balances so that we can make better long-term decisions. And that's one of the things I'm excited about the water fund work so far, is that we actually have future year-end water fund balance projections. And I'm really optimistic about that, and I'm really excited about
it. Is that a segue into your spreadsheet?
Maybe. Could be.
Which I
Craig,
welcome.
did you
I welcome
wanna
that conversation because just looking at it, it's hard without prioritizing those projects and plugging those in there. It's hard to not see where it's going, because you can see where it's going, but I think those numbers are important to talk about and essential when you talk about the water rates and if those are going to change.
I agree.
Or I should say how much they are going to change.
Are we referring to the transaction that from Craig on March 15th with the starts off of the Hellgate 8-inch loop?
Yeah.
I thought we were talking about John Burns' Excel spreadsheet titled Water Fund Budget Tool.
It's the same thread.
Okay.
And so, Elise, it's not surprising that we're talking about the same stuff because it's the same city and we're using the same process. And that same process is to look at the annual budget. The one thing that I think John has introduced, which is a break from that prior process, is, well, let's stop looking at this in annual chunks. Let's start looking at this in the context of a long-term plan. And the place that he has chosen to do that is with the water fund. And I think we should look at that now. And what I was proposing at my opening remarks is that we not just do that with the water fund, but we do it with the sewer fund, and we do it with the general CapEx fund, and we do it from a general 10-year, projection. The town hasn't done that for a long time. I think that will lead us to different and better decisions, but it's work and we can't get it, much done before the 23 budget. This is all work that would come afterwards.
Right.
So John did send out a spreadsheet on this. It had a list of projects. And I think that there is a difference between here's an estimate of how much money we need over 10 years. And that doesn't mean that all the projects on that list are greenlit at this time. This is what's known as authority to plan, not authority to spend. and typically, so my response to John only had a couple of lines of clarification. One, which John already agreed, was if this is a 10-year plan and we got inflation running at 8%, maybe we better include an inflationary component in on these build things.
Yeah, I wanted to point out to you that we do have an inflation factor in the expenses, and we're growing the expenses 5% a year. So, but on the CapEx project list, we felt like that was like beyond the scope of the accuracy of the estimate to begin with, is probably not within an inflation factor of right. So I think as we refine those estimates, I agree with you. We should add an inflation factor there too.
Look, I think, as you said, that list was from 2014. The first step is let's get whatever professional services firm did that, or whatever professional services firm trust, to go give us a new outside estimate on that. And that hopefully doesn't cost too much or take too long. And that's clearly the first step.
Well, I would say though that I think that that'll probably end up being part of it, particularly if we push to restrict any of the account to dedicate toward like the next year's worth of projects. I think that would be a good habit to start getting into, is to actually restricting the funds for the close-in projects. But John and Keith, I think John and Keith and Piper have an amazing knowledge of these issues and these projects, far deeper than my knowledge. So I'm only going to say, in addition to getting some outside consultancy, I think ultimately they're going to need to put their heads together and work on this when time allows. And I'd like to do an update now, because the universal feedback has been, this is a 10-year plan, let's make it 10 years. That's no problem. I wanted to see if there were any other comments today. We did receive some feedback from both John and Keith about projects that have changed. One of them got done. So yeah, we definitely, I definitely need their help to structure that. But let's roll that out to 10 years and then, figuring out one thing we did early in the process in January was say, listen, we want to, even though we don't have the whole 10-year plan mapped, we don't want to let a whole year slip by. So I know they do have a project teed up for the summer. It's going to let us, forgive me, John, for saying it this way, it's going to let us be back in the game with doing these projects, or this will be a bigger thing than we've tackled in a while. That's great. And a couple of new projects have surfaced that I know that the staff is anxious to do, including the water meter project. And then there are also new things that have emerged for the sewer fund as well. So maybe just taking it from the top, I had just a couple of things to point out about the spreadsheet. I'm looking at page 1. I have
Do you want me to share that, John, or is that helpful?
Oh, that would be
Good idea.
That would be great. That would be great. One point that this is the Excel version. It's roughly the same. I think the PDF one looks a little nicer. If you go to print it, the PDF one is the one to print. We've been running 15-20% increases in the water rate. And that's what's cooked into the budget for June 23. I'd say, well, geez, do we really need that big an increase? Well, it's a mountain of projects to do. The real number is probably more like 2 million than 1.3 million. So I think it's hard to imagine we're going to accomplish the 2 billion, whether we finance it or not. And I'm taking a wild ass guess at that number. By reducing the water rates. I mean, if we finance it, we're going to have to pay the financing. So, but in the projection going forward, we diddled with the numbers. It's a fairly complex formula. We diddled with the numbers until we got the water rate increase down to roughly 10% in the years going forward, starting with 2024. So I think that's noteworthy. That is line 14 there that Jen's got the cursor on. So you see how they've been running. And so this budget is not predicated on continued 25% increases in water rates. This budget is based on what I think is a sustainable long-term increase kind of rate of something like 10%. So I think that's noteworthy. As I said, the expenses, we've grown by 5%. And I've tried to highlight the numbers that I think were really relevant. If you go down to the bottom of page 2, Jen's already there. Line 77 and the revenue line, we're basically having no additional revenue, but that's because we're taking all excess cash. The budget's in balance. And in line 72, infrastructure replacement, paren charge, line 72, what we're doing is taking the net, what would be line 80, the net revenue over expenditures, and having a charge in the expenses to equal that number so as to zero out the budget. So these numbers of 75, 100, 130, 160, those are the contributions we expect the fund to make to its own reserve account over the life of this projection. By extending the horizon to 10 years, I think we're going to see that it's easier for this to be self-funding and get the whole list done. I think it'll also more readily accommodate the addition of some additional projects, the water meter being the one that's at the top of everyone's mind. By extending so I just sort of want to make that macro point, by extending the horizon of the analysis, there'll be more opportunity for the fund itself to replace its own reserve balance or excess fund balance over the life of the transaction and get all of these projects done. Piper, does that make sense to you? Do you think that's right?
Yeah, that sounds great. And I appreciate all this work, and that sounds like a great plan.
Thank you.
And this is a, with no financing, correct? I mean, there's debt service there is zero.
Zero. And I think you're even going to like the result more when we make it a 10-year plan, Roger. But yes, I think that was sort of like, if there were any like revelations in the process, I would say the revelation for me was that we could hold the rate increases to roughly 10% going forward and have the plan be self-funding, nearly self-funding over the 5-year horizon. And I believe it will be self-funding over a 10-year horizon. And the way you can tell that, I may need your help here, Piper, is to look at the, we left the long-term liability at $400,000 throughout this process, throughout this effort. And
Where does that show up on your sheet?
That's on page 4 out of 5.
Okay.
And if it was not self-funding, that would have increased.
Here, is that
Yeah.
it, Don?
Yeah.
Sorry if I was making.
Yes, two other funds. This is the, I don't know what else to call it, but this is the Harris issue. This is the Harris loan issue. So when
The
Harris says,
mystery.
what's that? Right, the conundrum. I think the answer is though, that when people say, well, what happens to the 400 grand loan that was such a big issue in the last administration, maybe righteously so, the answer is a great answer. The answer is we're leaving the $400,000 loan in place. We're neither writing it off nor are we paying it down. We're leaving it in place and we're focusing on getting the CapEx work done.
John,
here, does that appeal to you? We might have lost him.
to whom was that question directed?
I was thinking it was John Golder listening, but
Oh.
Roger, what do you think about it?
Sorry.
I think that's just fine.
Thank you.
Well, and I think it's fine. I think it's great too. And one of the things we talked about earlier, though, was I think it was 80-some thousand and change. We could pay back to the service area somehow. Because whatever we did out of the general fund, we couldn't say that, well, that helped everybody in the service area. That was, I think, the origin of Harris's discontent. But everything we spend on the water system within the original town boundaries, not counting the overlapping service district, it helps everyone. So not only just leave it in place, we could use that.
We could if we have to. And you know, I'm going to have a little longer answer to Roger's last question. There's no financing and very little grant revenue. I think we left sort of the average grant revenue has been like 15 grand or something in. But when we have a 10-year plan in place, I think there'll be lots of opportunity to pursue grants, to pursue low-cost, long-term debt through the variety of programs that the state offers and maybe even the county. And so that all represents ability to tackle additional projects to me, is like we're getting this list done without using financing or depending heavily on grants. And I'll point out, John, that we're not using a penny of the general fund in this model either, that this is entirely water enterprise fund money. And so I really want it to be beyond criticism. And so I think that that's how I made all those decisions, was based on how can we do this and set up the assumptions such that we'll be beyond reproach.
Good assumptions.
Yeah, and you know, this list that you've made that came from 2014, not only would the numbers change if we're to update it, but I suspect that some of the items would change too. That there's some things that have become higher priority. I can't believe that this is, you know, at the end of this, we will live happily ever after in our water budget. So this list will change over time, but it's a terrific starting place.
Thank you.
That's a good point. But, you know, just want to point out, we do have a pretty simple system. So, and to put everyone at ease, we are continuously maintaining, upgrading, and fixing that system. Like a few years ago up to West Grizz, there's a big leak, you know, and whenever there's a problem, we fix it. And not just the 1 foot that's got a hole in it, but maybe it's 100 feet. So simple system, we're maintaining it, we're fixing it, we're improving what we have. So I don't see this list changing that much. Although the actual, well, like the first one, Hellgate 8-inch loop, we're not going to do that because
There
it
we
goes
go.
through. Well, no, we're going to do the same thing. It's
Right.
going to be maybe 200 instead of 150, but that's not bad for 8 years. We're planning on doing it this summer. The Peruvian Estates West, the houses on that side have a dead end line that's tiny. So, and it's not deep enough. So we're going to put an 8-inch line down there, bury it deep enough, and that'll take care of their houses. But then instead of having to loop through Forest Service property and other private properties all the way down to Hellgate, that line improvement will take care of half of that problem. And then the service area has a reservoir on the north side of the road. We're going to talk to Salt Lake City. We're going to see if we can put a fire hydrant down on the north side of the road that will take care of Hellgate and Cottonwood Creek subdivision, which they now call the Falls. So it's the same thing as a loop. It's easier. We don't have to deal with Forest Service special use permits or other private land issues. So it's changed a little bit, but it's still the same thing. And I think it's maybe 200 grand instead of 150.
I noticed that none of these include the completion of the connection to the Grizzly tank, which is of unknown amount because, but
yeah, we can't
No,
do
it's not
that
zero,
until we deal with, we had money reserved for that. We can't do that until we come to some kind of agreement with the Patsy Marley estate.
yeah.
So, I mean, that's still there and that's still in there and it should be relatively easy, but they're using that as kind of a hold over what they want to do in the future.
Mhm.
So that's 50 feet of line that we could do in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And we can't do it until we come to some kind of resolve on the Patsy Marley issue.
And the only thing I would like to add to this on the expenditure side where you have infrastructure replacement, a lot of times we have used emergency repairs out of that category. Because if we have a $30,000 pipe, water pipe leak and repair, we don't really have a line item for emergency repairs. So it comes out of there because it actually is replacing or repairing the infrastructure.
Copy.
So our water system is kind of like your property tax notice, you know, it's like, they'll say your house was built in 2002, but the effective date built might be 2020. But we still have this list because we want it more effective.
I think that the thing that I'm excited about is the assumptions that we're not going to be using general fund money. So I'd like to see us start to consider more regularly using restricted funds. And if Piper promises to correct my mistakes, I'll summarize that as by town council, is it a referendum? I don't know.
Direction. That way you can go all causes.
I'm sorry, John?
You can cover all your bases just by saying town council direction.
by town council direction, like it would take an equal direction from the council the other way to unrestrict the funds. I think with these enterprise funds, or at least the water fund, where we have some things that we want to do in the short run, we want to be committed to them. I think that town council should get in the habit of considering at least restricting that amount of money within this general pot. I'm excited that we're not using general fund money. I'm excited that the thing is in balance. And I think we're in a very strong position because we'll have no debt. I think we will find grants and opportunities, which actually represents increased balance at the end of the analysis, increased fund balance at the end of the analysis. And I also think if the right special lending situation came along or initiative from the state, we'd have a balance sheet for the enterprise fund that's well positioned to take advantage of such special opportunities, special funding opportunities.
Yeah.
Right.
Great.
Great. Well, I will bust out another version of this in the next week or two. Thank you for your attention on that. I appreciate it, everybody. I know that it's a little more complex than some of the things we deal with, but I think it's a cool little model, and I will get on working on the other fund projections, at some point this summer, after a little vacation.
A little vacation. How long you been up there?
That might not be a
I'm working
vacation.
hard, as you can see. I'm working hard. Noah, yeah. So I'm excited. The other thing, I jokingly said a little vacation. The other thing is, John and Keith need to focus on executing the project this summer. And I'm going to remind you, Roger, that you promised to be the council member reviewing the engineering on the
Did I?
plan for John and Keith this summer.
As long as they're,
I think it's important that we not bog everybody down between now and June 30th with a bunch of long-term financial analysis. I'm retired, so I might work a little on it, but I think this is something we should pick up again after the June council meeting or the July 4th weekend, and maybe start working on, have another review of this kind of stuff, as the summer goes on. Because I don't want to press John and Keith to update their list when they've got 18 other things to do.
Yeah, I think the general principle of taking a longer term view to, the water, the sewer, and frankly, all the capital assets that the city has either owns or wants to do over some longer term time frame. I think that it takes a bit of planning because you really actually have to start with some growth assumptions around the town. But I think that's the single largest thing we can do to improve the quality of the decisions that the town makes regarding their budgets. So I really appreciate your starting it off in the water fund. And that was a long way of saying you got a lot of work left to do the other funds.
It'll be a joy. Piper, I don't know what you think, but I think far and away the hardest one to project 10 years is going to be the general fund.
Yeah, I agree, but I think it's a smart exercise to go through that and keep those plans on the horizon and to account for them. And I don't think
they should be living documents that we take out each year and review and change the list. And I don't even know that we got to wait, a year end. When something comes up, we need to change it. We'll be able to drop a new number in, change it, make sure it still works from the long-term perspective.
Yeah.
Sweet.
with respect to what the first item on the list, which is the Hellgate 80 loop, it now has a different name and a different cost number. What are those?
I guess we would call it the Peruvian Estates West Waterline Improvement. Because the
Okay.
line, like I said, that goes down, we were going to go, Craig, from from the top of the bypass road, there's like a 2-inch line that is not very deep that goes down towards the west, towards Hellgate, and feeds all of those houses that are on the west side. We're going to make that bigger, loop it down to Hellgate, and then connect it to the line that runs down the road. That would be the loop. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to do, because a lot of that land is Forest Service, it would take a while to get special use permits. We can do the same, we can accomplish the same thing, increased water service, no freezing, better fire protection for Hellgate and everybody else by digging that line where it exists deeper, making it 8 inches, and it still dead ends in a fire hydrant down below the last house in Peruvian Estates West. And then, like I said, there'll be a fire hydrant put in from the service area's reservoir, which is on the north side of the road. And it's great because that water is pretty much all lead. You can't drink it. Salt Lake City freaks out if they think that we're going to extend water usage outside of a particular contract boundary into another boundary, but we can't drink that water. So we think that we can be able to convince them that we're going to have that fire hydrant there. We'll be able to use that for Hellgate and or the Cottonwood Creek subdivision houses. So I guess it would be the Peruvian Estates West water line improvement and Hellgate fire hydrant. And we do, and I think it's going to be under $200,000. But you know, in 2014, it was 150 grand. So.
I'll put in 200 for that. Yeah, the fire protection aspect of that is not inconsequential.
It'll be
it's a huge
fantastic
improvement. Somewhere in the reading, I think the code is we're supposed to have 2 hours of fire protection, and
2 hours at 1,500 gallons a minute.
Right, with our shiny,
That's a lot of water.
Shire fire truck.
Okay, so when we talk about the general fund and the water system, when the Hellgate caught on fire a few years ago, they were sucking so much water. I mean, a fire truck can suck more water than we can pump. They were sucking so much water out of our system that had we not gotten Snowbird online when we did, they would have sucked the water out of our gigantic reservoir that's made out of concrete, and it's 365,000 gallons, and it would have collapsed. So no one can say, oh, we don't want you using general fund money for this new fire hydrant down by Hellgate, because if we didn't do that and Hellgate caught on fire again, everyone could lose their water. I mean, we manage it.
But we're not going to use any general fund money. We're going to use money from the enterprise fund. But I think that's a great point. Can I add the meter project? How have you guys, is everybody up to speed on the meter project? Do we want to have 2 minutes? I think we have 2 minutes left. Do we want to
I
have
don't believe everybody is, John.
I'd say no, but Clancy would kill me. But yes, I think it's a cool idea, very cool idea.
I think it's a cool idea if we can do it 25 or 30 grand a year for 2 or 3 years. I think 100 grand all at once seems like a lot of money to me, but.
Right.
It would take us 2 or 3 years to do it anyway, I think.
That's what I think too, John. We couldn't get it done in a year if we wanted to.
So just to tee up the issue is all of the meter readings in Alta are done by staff. We have a staff person that goes out and physically reads those meters. Some of those meters are inside homes, and that's due to the 500 inches of snow that Alta gets on an annual basis and why you don't want to have meters outside always. And so it's heavy on staff time. We can't read all of those meters often, like in a single day, which can be an issue. And also from the customer standpoint, you don't have readily available information to make decisions about your water consumption. So it's an effort to reduce the expense for reading meters and to give our constituents better information. So what the project really is we'd have to put, the town owns the meters once they've been installed at any facility. And so we would be responsible for replacing meters and then pairing them with what's called an endpoint. And the endpoint allows the meter readings on a I think a couple times a day to upload to a cloud-based system that the customer would have access to. And then it would also communicate with the town. So I guess that's it. So the total project cost is about $100,000, but we need to fine tune that number a bit. And I should.
And how
be
many
working on that
connections? I
this-
forget. That's connecting everybody, including,
I think there's about 70 to 80-ish in there.
That sounds right.
and we had a problem with the Peruvian. So like if the Highmark house has a big leak and we only read the meters every 30 or 45 days,
Yeah.
Mr. Highmark is going to be really mad when we send him a bill for all that water.
Yeah.
But now that we have this connected to the cloud, we can say, holy Moses.
Yep.
What's going on up
So,
there?
right, so the interest from the state, and we're looking to apply for some funding for this, the interest for them is water conservation. And I mean, yeah, by identifying leaks, changes in use, all of those things help you conserve water.
And the town might only take that reading once a month, but the homeowner could be checking that all the time and inform the town, like, hey, I'm losing 1,000 gallons a day. So, and I'm not even there.
In my personal case, in my Palo Alto home, the water people called me and told me I had a leak.
Oh
And-
my
And it
God.
turns out that there was a leak in the feed into my pool that, didn't affect the house, so I didn't know it. But because they had these meters, they said something's wrong. All of a sudden your water usage, and they caught it within like 36 hours. So
Yeah, it
that was,
happens a lot in
Whoa.
Alta with toilets when people kind of, they aren't here all the time and those toilets, valves and things get
Yep.
stuck in bad places. So that's a frequent one that we've seen here.
that was a long way of saying, my personal experience, these are really good things to put in place.
That's
Yeah.
setting the bar kind of high. We have 36 hours in case anything goes wrong after these things are installed. I think we can beat that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think John's suggestion that we try and stagger this as a 3-year plan is a good one. I think especially with like the priority list of locations that we'd want to hit is about 1/3 of them right off the bat. We've identified those already. And I believe that's probably something that our small staff could accomplish.
And just to point out, we still have account 5139-300 other financing sources on here. So if Jen's able to get some offsetting grants to help pay for the 100, it'll come back into the system, and the ultimate result will be that the cash balance at the end of the analysis will be that much higher. If we adjourn, this will be the best we've ever done in a budget meeting.
Yes.
Like 3 minutes over, that's pretty good for us. I don't mean to
It's a good
preempt,
conversation.
but anybody else have anything to add?
I have one side message to Craig, which is give Margaret a call and it'll save you a hell of a lot of time and anguish.
Yeah, I can't walk anymore. My hip is so bad. This is my granddaughter. She wanted to add her 2 cents in.
Well, it's probably worth like $50 though, compared to the rest of us. So yeah, add away.
All right. So are we finished? Roger?
you.
I'm finished.
Thank you, everybody. That was a stimulating discussion.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Excellent.
All
Thank
right.
you.
All right.
Thank you.
Roger,
Bye.
say meeting adjourned.
Meeting
Meeting
adjourned.
adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.